When a story's baseline is amazing, there will be many imitators, be it Romeo and Juliet, King Lear, The Hero's Journey, King Arthur, Shane, and Alien. There's something about those base core line plots which just inspire people to create similar versions. Off the top of my head, Alien has inspired Event Horizon, Pitch Black, Predator, Pandorum, Life Force, Life, Leviathan, and Dead Space, to name but a few of the good ones. And there's no doubt more. There's something about space or the deep seas and the fear of the unknown which terrifies us, especially when there's a 7-foot tall xenomorph with a tough, near impenetrable hide, a ginormous scorpion-like pincer tail, claws that mean it can climb anywhere fast, and a retractable mouth to pierce your skull. It's no wonder many of us near cacked our kegs when we were younger, watching it probably on a low-quality VHS your dad taped off the telly. Now, at the heart of every sensational story is a great narrative, something memorable you can relay to others easily for them to get a picture in their head of something they might like. And the best way to explain this board game is by first retelling what happened during my first experience. The ship was travelling in deep space. Suddenly 3 people were awoken from hypersleep, confused, shaken and suffering the slight amnesia deep sleep gives. They steady themselves and look around to see a former crewmate lying dead on the floor, their chest burst open and claw marks all over the room. The crew of 3, a scout, a scientist and a soldier, opened up their lockers, suit up and come up with a cooperative plan to search the entire ship to see what's gone on, locate other survivors, make sure the engines are working, and most of all, make sure they are still heading for Earth. Telling each other to be careful as they split up, find out weaknesses of whatever made the claw marks that came out of the crewmate, and lastly, send a warning signal back home. Slowly, they made their way around the ship, bypassing damaged rooms, fires, but finding no other survivors. Making noise, the intruders first showed themselves to the soldier, whom took out 3 adult variants before heading to the bridge and setting the coordinates back to Earth. The scout found the nest, stole an egg and studied the first weakness, but got pounced on unsuspectedly by a larva. And lastly, the scientist ran down to the engine room, inspected all the engines, only one of which was damaged, so they could safely leave. But as she made her way to the comms room to send the signal, she was attacked by a larva also. With just a few rooms left to explore, the soldier did his duty and checked them all, finding a few of them damaged and on fire, but encountered no other survivors. Instead, he got attacked by a larva. He killed one, but another infected him as the scientist encountered an adult and managed to kill it, but was heavily wounded in the process. It was obvious the outbreak of intruders was far too severe. A couple adults and a creeper patrolled the ship, with ammunition now expunged along with the hypersleep chamber catching fire. All the crew could do was escape via the pods. The scientist locked herself in the pod room, shutting all doors and waiting for them to open. The scout dragged the dead adult body to one of the rooms to find another weakness, but after she was done, the queen intruder appeared from the hallway and attacked. Hearing her distress over the comms, the soldier took a deep breath and, with no ammo, decided to leave the scout to her fate. Not wanting the ship to reach Earth though, he set the signal and activated the self-destruct sequence. With little time left, he ran to the surgery after feeling ill and had the larva pulled out of him. Fighting his way to the second escape pod room, he heard the scientist leave and the scout fighting for her life. The scout was a formidable warrior. She managed to hurt the queen twice and dodged her attacks, but it was too late. The larva inside her grew and ripped out of her body, killing the scout instantly. Knowing he was alone, the now lightly wounded and slimed soldier reached the escape pod just in time, seconds before the ship self-destructed. Tired and infection-free, he just wanted to go home and never think about what happened ever again. But unbeknownst to him, the scientist was infected, and the fight would now go back to Earth. That was the story of my first and best game of this. I've had different tales on all my playthroughs, but that is Nemesis in a nutshell. A cinematic horror experience with dice and monsters, and I've given it a rating of 4 out of 5. Every game of Nemesis starts the same. A number of survivors depending on player number, with a class drawn at random, Awaken in the hibernation room. You have a set number of cards which are specific to your class. You have some basic equipment, hidden upgraded equipment you can't get if you reach specific goals, and some tasks you need to complete before you leave or go back to sleep. But even with a generic, very dark playboard that is the Nemesis ship for you to explore, your story and events will be completely different to someone else's. I've had a solitaire game where my captain died after just 4 room explores. My other solitaire game didn't see an invader at all. Yes, it was boring. I've had a 5 survivor game where everyone got eaten. Another where there was just one survivor who went back to sleep in the hibernation room but was infected. And lastly, another 3 survivor game where the queen appeared on the board, the first invader pulled out the bag and tore everyone's souls apart almost instantaneously. The game saw me do my best as Sir Robin and run away after soiling armour. I can't stress enough how this game just oozes narrative playthroughs out of every orifice. It is its greatest selling point. There's no campaign here, no long-term progression, no character growth or plot outside of one goal. Survive and do that any way you can. Kill invaders, avoid invaders, work as a team, sacrifice your team by tossing grenades or locking doors, destroy the nest, destroy the engines, or send the ship into deep space for giggles as a captain orders someone into a room with an invader, so Yokon then run away. The only rule you can't break is hurting your fellow survivors intentionally with melee or shooting attacks. So this game is survivor horror at its most primitive. This is your own horror film experience on the tabletop, even if it is a little bit long of a 3-hour extravaganza. The time to play this is its biggest negative for me, as it does mean I'm unsure of it hitting the kitchen table often to justify its high price. So this game cost 105 quid, and that's the base game only from Amazon. Sure, you might be able to get a good deal here and there, but since this was originally a Kickstarter, you're paying a premium to get it and missing out on the extras after the fact. But even at its base game experience, I doubt I'll get anywhere near the value I would want out of this one. 3 hours or more with larger character groups, even as a solo only player, is a big chunk of time when you've got a wife, 4 kids who sometimes want your attention. And I have found stepping away from sessions and coming back to totally ruin the immersive experience and take you not just out of the narrative, but also I lost track of what was happening and what I'd done, whose turn it was, and so I just had to pack up and try again a few days later. There's a very long setup time. The board itself is a little bit darker than it should be for someone with partial blindness, so results may vary for yourself if you've got better eyesight than me. And I've found myself consistently checking the rulebook for not just referencing the symbology on the invader cards, but I also had to consistently check the end of turn bag effects when the hidden tokens change and the larvae grow into adults or breeders. Even playing games a couple days after each other like I did, I couldn't for the life of me remember everything because there's just so much complexity here, especially since the rulebook is exactly like the Nemesis ship itself, not the easiest to traverse. It takes you through the actions and turn structure, but it's lacking a great quick reference guide which tells you all the info like I've already described, things you need every turn instead of forcing you to go back to page 3 or 4 and then skip to other parts of the reference attacks or parts of the ship's rooms and what they individually do. This a small easy to learn game like Massive Darkness or Zombicide, every game you play you'll need to reference the rulebook or you'll be forget something saft and have to go backtrack or let it go if you're solely low in and the odd mistake don't matter. But in regards to solo, there is my next big complaint. But I call mine too much as I knew going in what I was in for, and that's the terrible thought that I've spent over £100 and only bought half a game as a solo only player. You see, this game is meant for 2 to 6 players. It's semi-co-op by nature, which means you're always on edge as to whether or not the person to your left or right is going to help or hinder your goal. They could be smiling 1 second and then locking you in the room the next as they see an invader coming and the company have ordered your execution. It's terrible knowing I'll never be able to experience a full proper game of Nemesis with a group, feeling the tension of walking down a corridor that could house not just an invader but a traitor also. But at least, as a solo player, I will be able to experience the downtime when your character dies. I've heard the horror stories of groups playing a 6-player game and losing a player turn 2 or 3 because you're permanently dead, no comebacks. So you could end up with only lasting 15-20 minutes with your mates playing for another 3 to 4, maybe even 5 hours. That's devastating, really. Take another game with you if that's the case. Yes, you could play the invader, but it does read like attacked on mode, which could easily be abused outside of the PvE game it's supposed to be. At least when playing solo, death don't matter. It's just part of the survival horror narrative you're crafting, be that playing true solo or solitaire as it's known. These solo phrases are casually slipping more and more into my vocab as I hang about the solo board game community more. That mode, I did feel, was a little lackluster though. I've played it twice, as I said earlier, and without really forcing the invaders to pop up with rushed movements into rooms, you really don't encounter much. Playing tactically, you can basically avoid encounters altogether with slow movement or only rushing into areas which have no yellow markers. The ship is big enough really to avoid encounters the vast majority of the time, unless you get unlucky with event system receiving tokens or taking fire damage if you have no cards left or unlucky events. But that's it really. You can plot a route to the engines, bridge and quest objective without hassle if you play carefully and tactically enough, but I did find it immensely boring. That might just be me though, as someone who wants invaders on the board, as they can bleed and that means you can't kill them, even if it is just a look of the draw mechanic to see how much armor they have. See, in the game there's 2 types of combat, melee and shooting. Melee forces you to take a contamination card before you roll the dice. These are cards which have a little hidden message on them to say you are infected or not, and can only be read via the surgery room, where you can also pull out any lava inside you, something akin to Prometheus, I imagine. But these cards fill up your hand, and if you get too many, it means you have less specialised actions, along with having more chance of infection, something that you won't otherwise find out about until the end of the game. But during combat, all you have to do is spend an ammo token, or use something up close and roll a dice, or more if your weapon allows. On the d6 dice you have a miss, a hit for a lava and creeper, a hit for an adult, 1 wound for anything and 2 wounds for anything, which is reduced in melee combat to 1. Then you place a wound marker next to the creature depending on how much damage you did. Lavas and creepers die instantly, but adults and above have to flip over a card, and the blood symbol in the top left tells you how many wounds they have that round. If that number is equal or lower to the wounds, they die. But if it's higher, it's their turn to attack, which is also done with the same cards. You can, of course, run away from the invaders, but you are still attacked and then might be wounded or go into a room that's on fire, damaging you even more. And wounds are a huge pain, as so many minors or majors will mean your death on most invader cards, along with you not able to move as fast or even carry items. The rooms are all unique every game because you have to shuffle the cards and place them randomly at the start of every game. The number 1 rooms are always on the board every game, stuff like evac, surgery, comms and the armory. But specialised rooms like cabins, command, engine status and showers only have 5 spaces on the ship, the ones closest to the hypersleep chamber, so you do get to see the same ones all the while. I do like the room placement experience. It really changes up the game, especially as they each have a random element to them, like fire, damage or items inside. It adds to the narrative experience of not knowing where anything is on the ship, but more often than not, the places you want to get to, like the armory to reload your weapon, often end up miles away on the opposite side of the ship to where you am. You have to keep tabs on what's broke or what's on fire, as too much damage to the ship can send it into self-destruct mode, and doors randomly shutting behind you can be a right nuisance if you're working as a team and suddenly get separated. It really brings out the narrative tension, especially if the invaders are coming. The only real randomness I like was the loot system. You get 4 lots of loot types to pick from based on the room colour you're in. Red is the one you want most, as their weapons more often than not, and each room has a number designated depending on the random event token inside it you uncovered when you traversed. More often than not, I found searching for loot a bit of a waste of time unless you're time wasting or are in need of something to craft your super weapons like flamethrowers. I've just not seen the point more often than not myself. Most of the time you'll want to move slower, which costs more cards, but doesn't mean you'll have to randomly roll for noise, the effect which brings out the invaders, because those things are scary, especially the adults, of which there tends to be more of, and so have more symbols on cards which do damage to you, which in turn could cause you to fall victim to the event cards which happen near the end of each round. Stuff like the hypersleep chamber catching fire, or infected characters getting ripped open by lava, and creepers roaming the ship, along with one which means invaders disappear into vents. There is so much randomness in this game which will put an absolute ton of people off. People who like to feel in control of the situation at all times, but that is what this game is. It isn't a game with an AI you can't manipulate and focus down along one track. This AI is hungry. It wants to infect or eat you. It wants to survive, and that makes for a great narrative experience. This isn't unfortunately the one in terms of game design. This is something for you to have on your shelf and play just once a month or every 3 months, or even just during Halloween. This probably worth the money you have to spend on it if you want to really focus in and get your money's worth. But what this is fun. Every playthrough will be unique. Every playthrough will be different. And I think I'm alright with that, especially with the miniatures here being such of a great quality. I'm not much of a minis guy for board games these days. I'm being turned off by the sheer size of boxes, and minis bloat a load of games I'm having. But this one just has enough, and everything fits in the box with a custom insert, something I wish more companies would look at and go, right, we have this, and this printed out, but if they punch out these tokens and dice, how do they fit them back into the box neatly? Most companies go, stuff it, let them sort it out themselves, but these here have crafted this beautiful insert which holds absolutely everything you need in a neat and tidy manner. Big props needed to be given to Awaken Realms for doing this. There's space for the minis, there's space for the cards, there's individual spaces for tokens and dice. It's neat and organised, and it means you don't have to faff around with baggies or just leaving stuff floating around in the box. This box design gets a star rating all of its own. It's amazing, and I wish more people talked about it, as it means if you wanted to play this often, it would be easier to do so. But alas, I think I've talked enough for now. I really do recommend Nemesis so long as you know what it is. This is a highly narrative, heavily randomised horror experience. If you're solo only, you're only buying half a game. And if you're co-op, just realise permadeath is a thing, so you might be knocked out early and have nothing to do. The rulebook could be improved with some key parts getting summarised. Hopefully the new one has done better in that regard. But I've enjoyed all but 2 playthroughs out of me 6 of this, and the only ones I didn't were the solitaire ones with a lone survivor. This game more than earns its 4 out of 5 for me. I can overlook the negatives, but some of you might not be able to, and hopefully my little breakdown has helped you see this game is for you or not. Thanks for watching, and tatty bye.